Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today we're diving into a topic that I've been thinking about for a long time. Why real men don't brag. It's a phrase you might have heard before, maybe from an old school mentor, a parent, or even in a movie. But what does it really mean? Why is bragging seen as something that undermines a man's character? And in a world where social media, flex culture, and constant self-promotion seem to dominate, is there still value in staying humble? I think there is, and by the end of this video, I hope you'll see why. So grab a drink, get comfortable, and let's unpack this together. This is going to be a deep dive, so stick with me. Let's start with a story. A few years ago, I was at a friend's barbecue. Just a casual summer thing. Burgers on the grill, music in the background, people laughing. There was this guy there, let's call him Jake, who I'd met a couple of times before. Jake was the kind of guy who always had a story to tell, and not just any story. One where he was the hero, the smartest guy in the room, or the one who came out on top. That day he was going on about how he'd just closed a massive deal at work, how his boss was practically begging him to take a promotion, and how he was thinking about buying a new car, maybe a Tesla because, he deserved it. Everyone was nodding along, but I noticed something. The energy in the group shifted. People started checking their phones, making excuses to grab another drink or just zoning out. Jake didn't seem to notice, but it was clear. His bragging was pushing people away. I didn't think much of it at the time, but later that night I started reflecting. Why did Jake's stories feel so off? He wasn't lying as far as I could tell. He probably did close that deal and maybe he was in line for a promotion. So what was the problem? It wasn't the facts, it was the way he was presenting them. It was like he needed everyone to know how great he was, like he was trying to prove something. And that got me thinking. What's the difference between sharing your accomplishments and bragging? And more importantly, why does bragging feel so unmanly? To answer that, let's take a step back and look at what bragging actually is. At its core, bragging is when you talk about yourself in a way that's meant to impress others, usually by exaggerating your achievements or putting yourself above everyone else. It's not just saying, hey, I got a new job. It's saying, I got a new job and it's way better than what anyone else here is doing. There's an element of comparison, of one-upping that makes it feel competitive rather than collaborative. And that's where the problem starts. When you brag, you're not just sharing, you're trying to dominate the conversation to make sure everyone knows you're the alpha, the winner, the guy who's got it all figured out. Now you might be thinking, what's wrong with that? Isn't it natural to want to show off a little? And yeah, to some extent it is. Humans are social creatures, and we've always found ways to signal our status, whether it's through the clothes we wear, the stories we tell, or the way we carry ourselves. In ancient times, a hunter might have shown off his biggest kill to prove he was a provider, and that wasn't necessarily a bad thing. It helped the group know who they could rely on. But there's a line between demonstrating your value and needing constant validation, and that's where bragging crosses into something else entirely. Let's go back to Jake for a second. The reason his stories fell flat wasn't because he was successful. It was because his success seemed to come at the expense of everyone else's comfort. When you brag, you're not just saying, I'm doing well. You're implying, I'm doing better than you. And that creates a subtle but real tension. People don't like feeling like they're being put down, even if it's unintentional. I've been in rooms where someone's gone on and on about their new house, their fancy vacation, or their six-figure side hustle, and you can just feel the air get heavy. It's not jealousy, though that can play a part. It's more like the conversation stops being a two-way street. It becomes a performance and the audience is just there to clap. So why don't real men brag? I think it comes down to confidence. Not the loud, in-your-face kind of confidence that needs to be shouted from the rooftops, but the quiet, steady kind that doesn't need external approval. A real man, in the truest sense, knows his worth. He doesn't need to tell everyone about his accomplishments because he's secure in them. He's not chasing validation or trying to prove he's better than the next guy. His actions speak for him, and when he does talk about his life, it's to connect with people, not to overshadow them. I want to share another story to illustrate this. Growing up, I had a mentor, an older guy named Mr. Thompson, who was a retired mechanic. He owned a small auto shop in our town. Nothing fancy, but it was the kind of place where everyone went because they trusted him. Mr. Thompson was a quiet guy, not the type to draw attention to himself, but over the years I learned he'd done some incredible things. He'd served in the military, raised 3 kids on his own after his wife passed away, and even helped rebuild the local community center after a fire. But he never talked about any of it unless you asked, and even then he'd downplay it. Just did what needed doing, he'd say, then change the subject. One day I was helping him fix a car, and I asked why he never bragged about all the stuff he'd accomplished. I was a teenager, so to me it seemed like he should be shouting his story from the rooftops. He laughed and said something I'll never forget. "Son, the louder a man talks, the less people listen." He went on to explain that when you're constantly telling people how great you are, they start to tune you out. But when you let your work speak for itself, people notice and they respect you for it. That stuck with me, and it shaped how I think about humility and strength. Let's unpack that idea a bit more. There's a cultural myth, especially in modern times, that you have to be loud to be noticed. Social media doesn't help. Scroll through Instagram or TikTok, and you'll see people flexing their lifestyles. Fancy cars, designer clothes, exotic vacations. It's not just individuals either. Brands, influencers, even politicians are in on it, crafting these perfect images to make you think they've got it all together. And for a lot of guys, especially younger ones, it can feel like you're falling behind if you're not out there shouting about your wins. The pressure to humble brag or straight up brag is real, because we're taught that visibility equals success. But here's the thing, that kind of noise doesn't build real respect. It might get you likes, followers, or a fleeting moment of attention, but it doesn't create lasting impact. Think about the people you admire most in your life. Maybe it's a parent, a teacher, a coach, or a friend. Chances are, they're not the ones who are always talking about themselves. They're the ones who show up, do the work, and lift others up along the way. Their strength is in their consistency, their integrity, and their ability to make you feel valued, not diminished. Let's talk about what happens when you brag too much. Beyond just turning people off, it can actually hurt your relationships and your reputation. I've seen this firsthand. A while back, I worked with a guy who was brilliant at his job. Let's call him Mark. Mark was a top performer, always hitting his targets, and he had a knack for solving problems that left everyone else stumped. The problem was he couldn't stop talking about it. Every team meeting, he'd find a way to mention how he'd saved the day, or how his idea was the one that worked. At first, people were impressed, but over time, it started to grate. Colleagues stopped collaborating with him, not because they didn't respect his skills, but because they didn't want to deal with the constant self-promotion. Mark didn't see it, but his bragging was isolating him. He thought he was building himself up, but he was actually pushing people away. And here's the kicker. When you're always talking about how great you are, people start looking for your flaws. It's human nature. If you're constantly saying you're the best, others will want to see if you can back it up, and they'll notice every time you slip. It's like putting a target on your back. Humility, on the other hand, gives you room to grow, to make mistakes, and to learn without the pressure of living up to some exaggerated image. Now, I don't want to make it sound like you should never talk about your achievements. There's a time and place for it. If you've worked hard and accomplished something big, it's okay to share that with the people who matter to you. The key is how you do it. Are you sharing to inspire, to connect, or to celebrate with others? Or are you sharing to make yourself look better than everyone else? Intention matters. When you talk about your successes with humility, it invites people in. It makes them feel like they're part of your journey, not just spectators to your greatness. Let's look at some examples of how this plays out in real life. Think about athletes. You've got guys like LeBron James, who's undeniably one of the greatest basketball players ever. LeBron's not afraid to talk about his achievements. He'll post about his championships, his philanthropy, his business ventures. But what makes him different from a lot of other high-profile athletes is that he's also quick to give credit to his team, his coaches, and even his opponents. He talks about the grind, the failures, and the lessons, not just the trophies. That balance makes his confidence feel earned, not arrogant. Contrast that with athletes who've built their brand on trash-talking and self-aggrandizement. They might get attention, but it's often fleeting, and when they lose, the fall is hard. Fans and media are quick to tear them down because they've set themselves up as untouchable. The same principle applies outside of sports. In business, in friendships, in family life, the people who command the most respect are the ones who don't need to tell you how great they are. They show it through their actions. Let's shift gears and talk about why this matters for men specifically. The idea of what makes a real man has been debated forever, and it's loaded with stereotypes, expectations, and cultural baggage. For a long time, masculinity was tied to dominance, being the strongest, the loudest, the guy who never backs down. Bragging fit right into that model. If you were the best hunter, the toughest warrior, or the richest merchant, you let everyone know because it reinforced your place in the hierarchy. But that's not the world we live in anymore. Strength today isn't just about physical power or wealth. It's about character, emotional intelligence, and the ability to build others up. A real man, in my view, is someone who's secure enough in himself that he doesn't need to prove it every chance he gets. He's not threatened by other people's success, and he doesn't feel the need to one-up them. He's the guy who listens more than he talks, who helps without expecting praise, and who knows that true respect is earned, not demanded. This brings me to another point: vulnerability. I know that word gets thrown around a lot and it can feel like a buzzword, but hear me out. Bragging is often a defense mechanism. When you're constantly talking about how great you are, it's usually because you're trying to cover up some insecurity. Maybe you're worried people won't notice your worth unless you point it out. Maybe you're afraid of being seen as less than. Whatever the reason, bragging is a way of putting up a shield of saying, "Look at me, I'm untouchable." The problem is that shield keeps people at a distance. If you're always projecting this image of perfection, it's hard for others to connect with you on a human level. Vulnerability, on the other hand, does the opposite. When you're willing to admit your struggles, your doubts, or even your failures, it makes you relatable. It shows that you're not afraid to be real, and that's a kind of strength that bragging can never match. I'm not saying you should air all your dirty laundry or turn every conversation into a therapy session, but letting people see the real you, flaws and all, builds trust in a way that flexing never will. Let's talk about how this plays out in relationships, because that's where the rubber meets the road. Whether it's with friends, family, or a romantic partner, bragging can be a relationship killer. Imagine you're dating someone who's always talking about how much money they make, how many people are into them, or how they're basically the best thing since sliced bread. At first it might be impressive, but after a while it's exhausting. You start to feel like you're in a competition, not a partnership. The same goes for friendships. If you're the guy who's always trying to one-up your buddies, they're going to stop inviting you to hang out. Nobody wants to feel like they're playing second fiddle all the time. On the flip side, think about the relationships in your life that feel the most solid. For me, it's the people who don't need to prove anything. My best friend, for example, is one of the most accomplished guys I know. He's built a successful business, traveled the world, and done things most people only dream of. But when we hang out, he's never the one dominating the conversation with his resume. He asks about my life, he listens, and when he does talk about his own stuff, it's always with this sense of gratitude, not arrogance. That's why our friendship works. It's built on mutual respect, not a need to outshine each other. Let's zoom out and look at the bigger picture. We live in a culture that rewards bragging, or at least it seems to. Reality TV, social media, even politics, it's all about who can make the most noise, who can get the most attention. And for guys, there's this added layer of pressure to be the man, to show the world you're a winner. But I think we're starting to see a shift. People are getting tired of the noise, they're craving authenticity, not another highlight reel. The guys who stand out today aren't the ones shouting about their greatness. They're the ones quietly doing the work, building something real, and making a difference without needing a spotlight. So how do you avoid falling into the bragging trap? It's not always easy, especially when the world around you seems to demand it. I've got a few thoughts on this, based on my own experiences and what I've learned from others. If you want people to respect you, show them who you are through what you do. Be the guy who shows up on time, keeps his promises, and helps out without making a big deal about it. Those things speak louder than any Instagram post or self-congratulatory speech. Second, practice gratitude. This one's huge. When you're grateful for what you have, you're less likely to feel the need to prove yourself. Instead of saying, "Look at my new car," you might say, "I'm really thankful I was able to save up for this." That small shift in perspective changes the way your words land. It's not about you being better than anyone else, it's about appreciating what you've been given and what you've worked for. Third, lift others up. One of the best ways to avoid bragging is to focus on celebrating other people's successes. If your friend gets a promotion, don't respond by talking about your own career. Tell them how proud you are, ask them how it feels, and mean it. When you make others feel valued, you create a connection that's way more meaningful than any ego boost you'd get from tooting your own horn. Finally, check your intentions. Before you share something about yourself, ask why you're doing it. Are you trying to connect, to inspire, or to get a reaction? If it's the last one, maybe hold off. This isn't about censoring yourself or pretending you don't have accomplishments. It's about being mindful of how your words affect others and whether they're coming from a place of confidence or insecurity. I want to wrap this up with a final thought. The phrase "real men don't brag" isn't just about keeping your mouth shut or hiding your light under a bushel. It's about understanding that true strength doesn't need an audience. It's about living with integrity, treating others with respect, and knowing that your worth isn't tied to how loudly you can proclaim it. In a world that's constantly pushing us to perform, to compete, to be seen, there's something powerful about choosing humility. It's not weakness, it's confidence in its purest form. So that's my take on why real men don't brag. I'd love to hear your thoughts. What do you think makes a man truly respectable? Have you ever caught yourself bragging or been turned off by someone else's flexing? Drop a comment below and let's keep the conversation going. If you found this video helpful, give it a thumbs up and don't forget to subscribe for more content like this. Thanks for watching and I'll see you in the next one.